Bets of millions in prizes we paid out in our history. We could talk about how we've never had a Dynasty League fold or the unique contests that we offer. But instead, we'll just say this. At the FFPC, we make millionaires.
Welcome into another live draft coverage here at the FFPC. Sunday night, every Sunday night from this point on is going to be main event coverage with myself, Dave Tripoli. Turp, the picks are flying in. This is fantastic for us as we see picks flying in here. How are you doing on this Sunday night, sir?
Doing very well. I mean, this is the best of the best, the FFPC flagship event. I mean, $2,000 to enter. This is no kiddie game type of an atmosphere. You're talking about the best of the best playing for $1 million. This will be a lot of fun. We'll be doing a bunch of these, obviously Sundays from here on out until Vegas. So let the games begin.
For those who don't know, the FFPC main event, as Turp said, kind of the flagship contest here at the FFPC. $1 million grand prize, $5.9 million prize pool. And as you said, these are the big players right here. $2,000 entry fee. The best of the best play in the FFPC main event. Online drafts just started this weekend, so we're kind of seeing one of the first online drafts to be completed. So really excited to see how the ADP shapes up. Terp off the board: Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Travis Kelce, Cooper Kupp, McCaffrey, Tyreek, Bijan, and CD. Pretty much going to ADP. I wanted to ask you though, you've obviously you've drafted in the best ball, you drafted in the fantasy pros on these streams. You're also play in the main event each year. Is your strategy at all different when you're coming into these bigger payout contests, these bigger entry fee, Is there a focus on maybe not as much? You always say you like to diversify the players you get. Is there less of a focus on that in the main event?
There's no such thing in the main event as diversification, to me, at least. I'd get my guys. You have a list. You have a short list of guys that you want to target in every round. You're not just taking guys because they fall. I mean, obviously, certain builds you might have to. But if you are fading a certain player, you are not taking him in this type of setup, no matter where he falls. At least in my opinion. I mean, this is a type of draft. You're spending this kind of money. You're going for $1 million. Get the guys that you believe in. Get the guys that you all season have been drafting over and over and over. It just makes too much sense. It's not, if you're fading somebody, this is not the draft you're taking them
at. Cooper Kupp goes at the 104 today. Obviously, had the injury. There was a little bit of concern. Obviously, we saw pros videos last week. Go check out those live streams if you have not, featuring 6 experts and 6 FFPC players competing in the same league. There were 6 total leagues streamed live on FFPC YouTube. Last week, we saw Cooper Kupp take a couple of little drops in ADP. News has been more positive in recent days. No concern at all from you with the hamstring injury now?
None for me. I mean, I was hoping there'd be a little bit more dip to try to buy more Cooper Kupp, but there really wasn't in any format. So that's a little bit of a bummer, but he's the only age, the team being, tanking for Caleb Williams in some people's eyes has a worry with Cooper Kupp. But besides that, you've seen his ceiling. You've seen his massive ceiling. He easily could be the wide receiver 1 this year and nobody would think anything different. So, I mean, he should be the number 3rd, 4th, 5th, right in that range and pretty comfortably.
Theo Greminger, I believe, a player profiler who's appeared on our live draft coverages in the past. I think I saw he had a tweet and he said that this year, beyond any other years in recent memory, is the most volatile ADP he's seen. Do you feel the same way? Is just the ADP draft to draft just all over the place?
I think outside of the top 6, who I think has been kind of set in stone, then you just have the Bijan Robinson sweepstakes. Everybody's, he's the guy that could get moved up there. Austin Eckler's kind of settling after that range. I don't see him much in the top 5. And after that, it's just which receiver you could target that you can get that you like more than the other one. Do you like Lamb? Do you like St. Brown? Do you like Diggs, Brown, Wilson? But you could also see some of these guys fall. Davante Adams is a guy that's been falling. He's going to the 1-2 turn. but he's also fell some to the end of the second round in some of these drafts. So you look at a guy like that, like it's Devonta Smith. I've seen Devonta Smith in the third round. Now he's going in the mid-second round. Mark Andrews has got pushed in the first round in some drafts. Now he's mid-second round. So the volatile drafting this is, like I said, it's a go get your guy type of situation. I mean, it looks like Olave is starting to move up where he should be, in my opinion. I mean, I saw him in some third round, which is crazy to me. But this is the main event. I mean, you're not going to see that talented of a player move down.
Yeah, I mean, I think just from my reference point, doing all these live streams, tracking the ADP for the FFPC, it's all over the place. And I think there's just a lot of interesting storylines and narratives that are affecting ADP. Obviously, a lot of the running backs holding out possibility, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs, injury concerns, right? You're seeing Javonte, Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker now. There's a lot of guys who are just, it's largely in the running back position, I feel. It's just kind of question marks all over the place, which is really impacting ADP. And beyond that, it's also just there's some tiers that I think are really close. Like I think we've talked about it, that we can see anywhere from Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, or Jalen Hurts go as the QB1 off the board. They're usually in that like within a round of each other at most, but it's all over the place. But I want to ask you, you mentioned dips. You wanted to buy Cooper Kupp's dip. There's a lot of guys who enticing opportunity to buy the dip this year. We already missed the window with Saquon, right? That was a couple of weeks.
It was a quick window, but third round Saquon was out there for a little bit.
Yeah.
And there's going to be some teams that are, quote unquote 3-round super teams so far. Obviously, the rest of the 17 rounds matter. But I mean, you're getting Barkley in the third round, some of these drafts. I mean, you got to compete with that. So you have to keep in mind when you're entering these contests, like we talk about buying dips, like you just asked. Jonathan Taylor hasn't been drafted yet. Where he just went, but so now you have a Jefferson Taylor team. Jonathan Taylor comes back, signs, or whatever goes on. Jonathan Taylor is not going to be getting drafted there. So you gotta, if you're drafting right now, I read a bunch of tweets this week that said this is the best time to draft, and they think a lot of the champions are going to come from this time. I don't know if I 100% agree with that, because there's still a lot of questions, on some of these players you mentioned, like Javonte Williams, Jonathan Taylor, Kenneth Walker, Rashad Bateman.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we can keep going on the list of players that are kind of either stuck, going backwards. Travis Etienne. Everybody keeps talking about Tank Bigsby this, Tank Bigsby that. Travis Etienne could fall maybe in the 5th round in some of these drafts, where he realistically shouldn't. But it's tough right now because, usually at this time it's kind of stale drafting, where it's kind of just ADP. You might see a little guy move here and there, but you're just pretty much drafting off, the ADPs in front of you. But this is a little volatile because, like I said, Jonathan Taylor shouldn't fall here. Probably won't fall here, because by the time late August rolls around, or, early September when we're drafting in Vegas, you'll have more clarity on that situation.
Yeah, and adding to the unpredictability of these drafts, we haven't even mentioned Leonard Fournette, Ezekiel Elliott, Dalvin Cook, all unsigned. And it's a lot of different questions.
It's just showing you the craziest this year. Like you just mentioned those guys, like Marlon Mack and Kenyon Drake signed this week. None of those guys did.
Yeah.
On teams where all of them could have been used. If you really look at the, the math of it. I mean, Marlon Mack, I mean, I know it's the, Cardinals, I think it was. Yeah. He's not scaring anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Kenyon Drake, not scaring anybody.
Yeah. There's also something to be said, though, too, is we haven't even gotten to the preseason. When we know preseason snap counts and how offenses are looking is going to skew this even further. So
I just hope that these teams are starting to take more of what the Philadelphia Eagles are doing. Don't mess around with your starters in camp.
Mm-hmm.
Practice hard. Figure that all out in practice. But week 1, be healthy. Because all these teams will go out there and play all their guys. I mean, I understand certain situations like young team, rookie, quarterbacks type of thing. But these veteran teams, whatever possessed you to put, guys like Aaron Rodgers out there for 2 quarters? It just makes no sense. You're just setting yourself up for something catastrophic that would ruin your whole season.
I love
to me, it's just rest these guys. I don't want to see Garrett Wilson. I don't want to see Cooper Kupp. All these preseason injury guys. Just rest, relax, just chill. Sit on the bench, no helmet, just relax.
I loved all the tweets that were this time a year ago the Hall of Fame game last week. That this time a year ago, Josh Jacobs was getting snaps in the Hall of Fame game. Crazy to look back
on. It's still crazy. We made comments. I remember the show after that. We were just laughing about it, joking about it. And Josh Jacobs was a league winner. It just shows you the crazy. There's not a person, anybody in the world that liked Josh Jacobs last year, especially after the Hall of Fame game. Mm-hmm. Nobody could go out there and sit there and be like, Josh Jacobs is going to be a league winner this year. Hey, it worked out. Sometimes there's a lot of luck involved in the sport. And to me, that will always be number one on the list.
Mm-hmm. I want to go back to the second round. Tony Pollard at the 206. That's been pretty much where he's been at, right? He's been at the 206. Are drafters just waiting for the other shoe to drop and just they sign another running back? Basically my question is, do at any point you see him moving up? Because you would think the more and more the summer goes on, we'd be moving Pollard up to that early second.
He hasn't moved up yet, and I don't understand why. I mean, I keep sitting there and I'm looking at all these guys and I'm just like, why is Pollard not moving up? But then you look at the list and it's like, who's he going to move up over? Like, is he moving up over Eckler? I think he should, but that doesn't mean he's going to. Mm-hmm. Saquon Barkley? I think he should, but he's not likely. Nick Chubb is like the hottest name in fantasy football right now. When it comes to, he's going to get all the carries, catching all the passes. Like, is he going to be that guy now? I don't believe it, but I mean, Tony Pollard is a gift right now in the mid-second round. Pairing him with a Tyreek Hill, pairing him with a Bijan Robinson, pairing him like if you get lucky with a Cooper Kupp. It would be a dream start. It's an absolute dream. Mm-hmm. So
my thing is, again, you say it's obviously a personal preference, and we know how high you are on Pollard. He's never moving above McCaffrey, Robinson, and Eckler. Ever, right? Never. But I would think that I would see more of Pollard as RB4, and it really just hasn't happened. Pretty much every draft, he's going at roughly RB6.
I don't know what people are scared of. Like, you've seen the production last year with Zeke. Mm-hmm. Okay, if you're scared of Zeke coming back, that's fair. Okay, I guess. I mean, I'm not scared of him, but what makes you they got rid of Zeke to feature Pollard? They paid Pollard. I mean, I know it's a franchise tag, but they still paid him. So what makes you think that Zeke's going to really do any damage? Malik Davis, nice young player, but come on. Like, who are they going to sign? Leonard Fournette is the only guy they could sign that can, in my opinion, mess things up. Dalvin Cook, obviously, but I don't think that's really happening.
Mm-hmm. Josh Jacobs goes at the 311 in this draft.
Oof.
311.
You don't see that in the main.
Hey, I feel as though I'm going to be honest. It's uncommon. We've seen it more on these live streams than I think we saw at any point last year. Is people are kind of stacking these elite quarterbacks, especially knowing there's really a scarcity of them. It's gaining. We saw Billy Muzio do it, right? Granted, that was a best ball draft, I believe, but there's been some interesting starts that we've seen.
Yeah, I would say that's an interesting start line. I mean, you only can start one, and I just don't. I mean, I know in these bigger events, people like to sometimes play the keep away game, mm-hmm. but I don't know how that does you any good personally. Like, you started off outstanding, Eckler, Barkley. I mean, you can't ask for a better start, if you're going the running back route. And then you take Josh Allen, you steal him from the Diggs team right after. Fine, mm-hmm. Okay. But the Burrow pick, it's tough because in this format, like, you got to make a decision every week, and both of those guys are, in some people's eyes, top 4, quarterbacks in the game. So who you picking?
Yeah.
Hopefully it wasn't a mistake from the drafter, but as of now, the draft hasn't been stopped. So that's going to be tough to overcome, with no receivers through 4 rounds.
Terp, staying on the quarterbacks, obviously Mahomes, Hurts, Josh Allen in some capacity is always the first 3. Who is the 4th quarterback off the board in your eyes, on your personal big board?
I mean, me personally, it's Hurts, Lamar, Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow's right there. After that, it's just Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields, and then there's just a massive drop-off for me.
Are we underestimating? I think we are. I'll say it. Kellen Moore, what he's going to do to that Chargers offense and expand it, the downfield passing game, the weapons that they have. Herbert's going to be, if healthy, in for a big season. Herbert was solid last year, and he was playing on broken ribs throughout the year.
I was arguing with a friend of mine who I'm going to be drafting one of these at the end of the month, and he's not a Herbert guy, and I was trying to throw some stats at him to make him understand, like, he did all his stuff last year without ribs. I mean, literally just throw, and nothing stopped them. They had no deep down the field game. Kellen Moore loves chucking the ball down the field. Big plays, more possessions. They have the ability with Mike Williams and Quentin Johnson, the rookie. He's having a great camp so far. Keenan Allen, is, if he stays healthy, one of the best possession receivers in the game. Josh Palmer's no slouch. Eckler's in that backfield. I mean, that team just has so much potential on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah,
it's just a question of health.
Kellen Moore, I mean, I know there's mixed opinions from Dallas fans on him about what he did in his career there, but we asked the numbers fantasy wise. I think
you can say whatever you want. Dak was really, really damn good with Kellen Moore, and Justin Herbert is 100 times better than Dak, talent wise, and every aspect of the game. It's something to watch. Justin Herbert, if he just can mix in a couple rushing touchdowns, he has the ability. If the perfect storm doesn't happen with Jalen Hurts and his 1-yard touchdowns, he has the ability for QB1 upside.
The Justin Herbert's ADP in the main event since in the last week, I should say, 506. So we should be seeing him go off the clock soon. There's also something to be said is, just off the top of my head, the stacks that you can get with Justin Herbert are really enticing because you don't necessarily need to spend that first and second round capital, right? Unless you're trying to do kind of a running back quarterback stack with Eckler. Yeah. You can get Keenan Allen. He's in the third, right? The Mike Williams, Quentin Johnson, kind of take your pick there. And then Gerald Everett.
Mike Williams still hasn't been drafted yet. Quentin Johnson won't be drafted for a little bit. I mean, you could pair him with Eckler. If you take Eckler, that makes sense. It's just so crazy how these drafts are so much different from the best ball drafts because you see, tight ends getting pushed up, Kyle Pitts. I mean, we saw a couple drafts where I got Waller in a couple drafts in the 5th round. I think 3 straight streams that we did, best ball and fantasy pros, Darren Waller's my 5th round pick. Yeah. You ain't sniffing Darren Waller in the 5th round anymore. Yeah. He's been getting so much positive press in camp. Seems like everything's going well in New York. If you want him, you're going to have to move him up.
I'd have to think, right? $2,000 entry fee in the FFPC main event, $1 million grand prize on the line, tight end premium format in the FFPC. I'm sure there's an even more heightened reliance on trying to get an elite tight end than in best ball and even
6 of them through 4 rounds. That doesn't rarely happen in best ball. I mean, usually you see the top 2 pretty clear. Hawkinson's, around that 3rd round range. And then the rest of the guys, Waller's been moving up. Kittle, we saw Kittle in the 5th round of some drafts. Kyle Pitts, he hasn't been in many 4th rounds in drafts. But it's an interesting build. You have Kelsey, you have Pitts, obviously with Mahomes. Another mojo stat today that's just going to tweak people even more. The most stacked guys so far this year, Mahomes and Kelsey. But I said it 100 times, and I'll probably say it 100 more. If you're taking Kelsey, I know it's different, but if you're drafting Kelsey, not taking Mahomes is very, very tough because if everything does go well, you're playing against a ton of other teams that have them, but if you don't have Mahomes, you're just behind the 8 ball in the big money rounds.
You're a veteran fantasy player, high stakes fantasy player. And I'm going to ask this to the chat too, and I'm going to get to the chat. I had a lot of questions for us. I know I'm behind on those. I'm going to get to this, but I want to ask you real quick, and I want to also ask the chat because I know there's a lot of guys in the chat right now sounding off who are experienced high stakes players in their own. Have you ever seen anything like Kelsey and Mahomes and the reliance on just these 2 players and the consistency that you're seeing them go? That's always a 1st, 2nd round start. Sometimes even Mahomes in the 3rd. Have you seen anything like that?
No, I mean, not in recent memory. I mean, after the mojo stat this year, what he showed of the teams who made it last year, and 75% of the teams that had stacks made money. I mean, that's a stat that people are going to see. And people are going to try to replicate this year. You play it from the other side, from the game theory side is, let's just say something goes wrong in Kansas City and one of those guys get hurt. That's a massive advantage you have over the field in every aspect when it comes to those teams. You're pretty much eliminating all those teams. So, since in recent memory, I can't name anybody. I mean, there's been a couple that you would say are close, but it's just so consistent. I mean, Travis Kelce, most people, including myself, thought he was going to fall off the cliff last year. We were wrong. So wrong. But it's interesting.
Questions in the chat, specifically Terp. I'm gonna give these to you because they're kind of responding to some of your points. Let me get the name. I don't want to screw it up. Let's see who said it. It was just BW. BW was saying the chat is back on our Tony Pollard conversation, just theorizing maybe the Zach Martin holdout is a little bit concerning, and what Zach Martin means for the line. I think that's a valid point. I don't know how much it's depressing.
Extremely valid.
It's not depressing Pollard's ADP. It's just maybe that is a good reason for it to kind of have stayed and stabilized and plateaued in the mid-second. But I feel like there's at just some point, Tony Pollard, the opportunity and just the receiving work I think he's going to get, it's just surprising me he's not rising. But valid point, Zach Martin's holdout is a bit concerning. Some more questions. Terp for you. Terp from Rich Billiard. Do the dusty old receivers, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, worry you at all with Herbert?
Of course they do. I mean, that's the biggest question with the Chargers this year. Like, I love Herbert. I'll take Herbert in every single draft that I could. And the last stream we did, I still have nightmares that I missed out on him and Lamar when I set up everything as perfect as I could. But sometimes it doesn't work out. But with Herbert, the question is, who do you stack him with if you go the stack route? In the main event's a little different. Like, I still will probably stack all my main event teams that I have the ability to do it. Just because if you make it to the finals and you make it to the final round, I just think it gives you an advantage if everything goes right. Obviously, like you've seen the Burrow chases, the Kelsey Mahomes of years past. But with Herbert, it's like Keenan Allen, injury history. Is he starting to fall off that cliff? Mike Williams, he's shown flashes, but he just can't put it all together. Is Quentin Johnson the guy that people think he's going to be now? Seeing all the positive stuff in camp. Or is people going to, fall into the TCU, trap of all the receivers that come from there that have been just not good?
Speaking of TCU receivers, I saw your tweet about you in the background of Jalen Reagor's cat. Is that the worst sports take you've had? Would you say?
It's definitely probably number one. When he got drafted, I said he was going to be the next Tyreek Hill. I was very, very confident in that. I remember when they drafted him over Justin Jefferson, I was sky high. One of the happy. I was arguing with anybody who wanted to argue. Eesh. Well, hopefully fantasy receipts don't find that one.
We can't win them all, right?
It was bad, but I mean, like I was literally standing in the background there with a friend of mine, right in front of the catch, and I'm just like, this guy's the one. And it couldn't have been any more wrong than it was.
Were you able to make it to the Eagles Fan Fest was today, right? The open practice. Were you able to make it out there?
No, I'm down the shore. We had pictures with my daughter on the beach tonight, so you know how that went. But yeah, not at the Eagles practice tonight. We'll be going to a bunch of games this year. But yeah, Fan Fest. It's too hot out there right now for me.
Joe King in the chat says, could Terp look any more relaxed? Maybe.
I am pretty relaxed. I really like this setup.
Not the most professional setup by the both of us, but we're bringing good vibes, which is what
the professional setup doesn't always work. I'm really comfortable right now. Probably the most comfortable I've ever been on a stream. I try to, in my office that I have at my house, I try to set it up so it's comfortable. And the chairs just suck. I mean, I'm currently sitting in a spare bedroom down the shore at my mother-in-law's house, and it's really freaking comfortable. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, the people are here for us just talking shop on fantasy football.
That's just what we do. I mean,
we're going to be relaxed.
We're not taking anything too seriously. I mean, we're being kind of nice tonight with some of these drafts. That's going to be a different transition with me. But you're spending $2,000. You can do whatever the heck you want.
I mean, these people, not maybe you. They know more than me. They're putting their money where the mouth is, which I will always respect.
Every single one. And they're drafting August. What is it? August 6th.
Yeah.
Spending this kind of money. I mean, literally anybody in this room right now that's been drafted could get hurt. Hopefully none of them do, and everybody's healthy going into the season.
That's scary.
You're spending that kind of money, and we've seen it over the years of big injuries. It's a danger drafting this early, but you can also get a ton of value with guys.
I was about to say the flip side is you mentioned earlier is the people were saying, you said you don't necessarily agree with it, but I do think there's something you said is there's so much good value you're finding and you're buying these dips. I'm sure that's why a lot of people like doing these drafts is you feel as though I can hit some points at those Jonathan Taylor dips that maybe in a couple of weeks it's not just he's going to be back up in the front of the second round. So
it's a great time to draft. Like I said, I saw a bunch of tweets this week from a lot of well-known guys around the industry that said this is the time to draft because there's so many dips and you can buy him. And like you look at Jonathan Taylor with Justin Jefferson, you're not going to see that team that often, especially if he signs. Kenneth Walker in the 5th round, if he's back healthy, you're not going to see that. We can keep going down the list of players that are falling for whatever reason it is. And will eventually Javonte Williams, he goes out there and has a, preseason, flash play or something like that. He went from being free in drafts, when we first start in these coverages, to being a 4th, 5th round draft pick, which is crazy to me.
I mean, his recovery is impressive. I might not believe it till I see it, because I feel like we saw obviously in their Super Bowl run, Cam Akers kind of rushed back from that Achilles, and they said, nope, he's ready to go. And by all accounts, he just wasn't Cam Akers, and didn't even look like Cam Akers last year. I know it's the knee, it's not the Achilles, which by all accounts, but the severity of his injury, it's just, I'm still a little bit wary. But let me tell you, compared to what you and me, who are pretty just not anti-Javonte, but just staying firmly away, I'm slowly getting converting and maybe to the dark side a bit.
I'm not getting converted, and I don't think I will get converted, but I'll mix him in every once in a while. Like he won't be I said 0%. I said 0%.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be like a 2%, out of the whole portfolio.
I won't
be 0 because it's just not a smart thing to do. Just go 0% of a guy who could be, a game breaker. Obviously, you've seen it in the past. I can't go 0% on the guy, but it won't be much higher than that. I still have my doubts. I mean, I still think you're going to see some guys mixed in Denver, whether it's P. Ryan or whether it's somebody we don't even know about now. I could see them. There's talks. You see the rumors. If Josh Jacobs' franchise tag gets rescinded, they could be in the market there. I could see him adding, a Leonard Fournette or a guy like that to just muddy the waters up even more. So he's not a guy that I'll be targeting. I mean, 6th round to me with some of these guys that are getting drafted before and after him is just too rich for my blood with so many questions with his name.
There is somebody who said that you also don't want to miss out on a possible lead Sean Payton running back. He goes at the 606 today. Catching up on the chat. In response, I got a couple of responses to my Kelsey kind of Mahomes question and how you've seen it. Rich Billieu says Fouts and Winslow.
Wasn't born yet. Come on, Rich.
Fantasy
football didn't even exist back then.
Sure. Fantasy Mojo says a more Darren Armani in the chat. He gives a little more recent example. He says he thinks it's similar to what we saw with Diggs and Allen last year, but he's the guy to ask. So Diggs and Allen, it just doesn't feel. I think maybe it's because you're looking at a top 3 pick usually with Travis Kelce, so it feels. But Diggs and Allen was incredibly popular, and only more so after that the opening Thursday game. Looking at those couple of days of drafts after the opening Thursday game, but that's what he says. I can
Diggs and Allen this year is like the one stack that nobody's talking about. Everybody talks about all the primary ones with the Jalen Hurts and not really AJ Brown, but the Devonta Smith, and then obviously targeting Goddard a little later. You have the Mahomes with Kelce. Obviously, everybody's talking about that. But Josh Allen's a guy, like if you're drafting Diggs like Team 11 did, and Josh Allen falls to you there, like that's like something that's sneaky that most people are like just not on it this year for whatever reason. After last year, which it was, pretty damn good. So it's definitely one I've been trying to add more lately that is kind of a little bit under the radar. That's right in your face.
You always see fantasy Twitter a popular thing. It's a little bit overblown, I think, in regards with people dream about. But the idea is like, oh, you were drafting X player in round 2 last year. Nothing's changed with his situation. He was just like, oh, he was banged up last year. Some such and such happened, and now he's going in like the 6th round. In a way, I do agree with that with Diggs and Allen, as Mojo said. That was like a popular 1st, 2nd round stack. And now you can get that with Josh Allen, kind of a round discount. They had a really good year again together. I know there was some probably concern or very early on with perhaps some unhappiness between the two of them, and there was maybe some beef, but by all accounts that's been quashed. No issues there. And I've been on this show so many times, and I just sound like probably a broken record, but James Cook is really enticing to me, but sometimes I just do wonder if that Buffalo offense is just a 2-horse fantasy offense, right? There has to be someone emerge. We always feel that way, and then maybe no one does.
I mean, you keep hearing about Gabe Davis and other it's so hard because all these preseason reports come out, and most of them are not negative. Like you have a couple that are here and there, but everything's about how Gabe Davis is having a great camp. Cortland Sutton's having a great camp, and this guy's hooking up with it, and everything's like looking perfect. You got to try to figure out a way to weed through the crap because there's so much that goes on in the preseason that will suck you in, and most importantly, move guys up, rounds, that they probably shouldn't get moved into. So, like you said in Buffalo, like, is it Dalton Kincaid? He's been kind of quiet. I know people are like anti-rookie tight end this year, but there's a lot of good ones, and I think Kincaid's one of them. And he's definitely a guy that, like, if I'm waiting on tight end, yeah, you still have Dawson Knox there, but Kincaid presents so much upside. I mean, everything's been positive in camp so far. It just makes too much sense. Like, if you miss out on one of these top 7 guys, or, you're not in on Freiermuth or Njoku or Ingram or one of those guys, Kincaid seems like the perfect target. I think he's going to be the second best option behind Diggs. I like Gabe Davis. I mean, Gabe Davis to me is a best ball guy. He's going to have spike weeks, but he's also going to have weeks when he's 1 for 18 and he just tortures you.
In terms of training camp buzz, Luke Musgrave and Sam Laporta, beyond Kincaid and Meyer, have been getting, like, the last week, probably both of them in the top 3 in terms of guys I've been seeing getting the most training camp love for. Those 2 guys have just been otherworldly.
And if you really look at all the rookie tight end, situations, Kincaid is probably the one that's like the most hardest to figure out because he's a top pick, but he still has Dawson Knox there. Diggs is the alpha, obviously. Gabe Davis is still around. They obviously, James Cook is like the hot thing of the preseason. So, like, there's a lot more muddy waters there to where you have the other guys like Laporta. Realistically, just has, St. Brown. Jameson Williams is not back. Nobody's really worried about Marvin Jones. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to give him some issues. And then you have, Musgrave, who Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed. That's it. There's no veteran there to steal any snaps from him. And even in the Raiders, you have Michael Mayer, who you're not really worried about Austin Hooper. So outside of, outside of, Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers, the rookie tight ends this year, there are a lot of really good spots. Will they pan out? That's what they pay us the big money to find out. But they're in a lot of good spots this year.
In terms of guys who are getting steamed up ADP wise due to training camp buzz, training camp highlights, which one are you most buying into? And just some names off the top of my head who've already been drafted or probably going to soon. I mentioned James Cook, Laporta, Musgrave. You're seeing a lot of positive Watson buzz. I saw you, obviously you and Bulk were talking about a great catch you made, or maybe it might have been for the touchdown. He's been having a good camp. But who's the guy you're kind of seeing in these preseason training camps that's getting all the buzz? Obviously, we talked about the Chiefs, Deneric Prince, Justin Ross. Is there one guy you're like you just feel yourself buying into this hype and you always are like, I know I shouldn't, but I am? Who is that guy for you?
I mean, right now, looking at this really quickly, it would have to be 2 guys. I'll give you it. I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs, I'm shocked he went in the 3rd round of this draft.
We've talked about Jahmyr Gibbs. We know it, and it's only going to be.
I'm surprised he's lasted this long. I mean, I'll mention
that's
him
a little bit late.
He should be higher. Like, I'm taking Jahmyr Gibbs over Jonathan Taylor right now.
Okay.
That's me. But everybody could be different. But the guy is James Cook. I mean, he's a guy that we were getting comfortably 2 rounds later that has been getting steamed up in the 7th and sometimes the 6th round. I like James Cook. I'm very highly exposed to James Cook. I like him as a player. But is he getting moved up to like the Dameon Pierce, James Conner, J.K. Dobbins range? Is that where he should be? Like, obviously, you're hearing a lot of positive press from Buffalo, but Damian Harris is no slouch. He's not a guy that I'm like in love with or anything, but Josh Allen's still there to rush the ball. Like, the Bills have never really thrown the ball to the running back. It just seems like it could be a trap. I hope it's not a trap, but I feel like it could be one.
If we should do a weekly stock report just based on training camp highlights and like beat reporter buzz of who is getting moved up the most, just based on that alone. James Cook is probably number 1 from the past week, I'd say. Just in terms of
100%. I mean, he's just skyrocketing up draft boards right now, and I kind of get it because but it just comes down to the same thing with these drafts. I mean, you're seeing all these, positive puff pieces on guys, and you're not going to see much negative. And guys who are like kind of fringe, like James Cook, who was, were fringe coming into these drafts are now getting bumped up and up and up and up and up when guys that are, guys like, we'll use the guys in Tampa Bay. Rashad White went pretty high here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's been kind of sitting in the 6th, 7th round. But like anybody in Tampa Bay right now, like you can Godwin, Evans, like nobody talks about him. Nobody says a word about him. Like everything's so quiet. So like Cook's going to start moving past these guys to where he's going to get in a little uncomfortable territory for me.
The Rashad White pick's interesting. There was some interesting Rashad White discourse on fantasy Twitter this week.
I did see some wacky stuff this week on Rashad White, and I'm not the biggest Rashad White fan, especially this year. I don't have that much of him. Based off builds, he might make it to my teams a little bit more, but some of the takes were just out of their mind.
Yeah, the thing with Rashad White is I loved him as a player coming into the league out of Arizona State. I liked what I saw last year, but it was one of those, and I went and looked at, and it's sometimes I think my eye test is better because the advanced analytics behind Rashad White weren't the kindest in terms of his rushing ability. No. But I just think the opportunity is there. But I've also talked about reports at a training camp. Baker and Kyle Trask are both. I think
I think Kyle Trask is going to start personally.
They're both trying to lose the starting job. And I saw with Baker last year in Carolina that even McCaffrey was putting up okay numbers, but it wasn't great. There's some concern. I've said it for Godwin. I've said it for Mike Evans. And I think Rashad White, it factors into is that offense just could be so horrendous that it just has no fantasy value. Just even though the names are good and the talent is there, the quarterback play just completely restricts what Rashad White, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin can do.
100%. I couldn't agree more. Baker is a massive worry. If I'm a Bucs fantasy owner with White, Evans, Godwin, K. Dotton, whoever it is, I want Kyle Trask to be the quarterback because Baker is. I saw a stat the other day: 7 interceptions in 9 practices. That can't be going over well down there.
Just getting on, Mojo was in the chat saying Rashad White's ADP was 1002, but that he was saying that was his mistake from last year. I was like, oh my! I said, what did I miss there?
I was going to say 1002. That seems like a gift. I mean, I'll take him at 1002 100 times out of 100.
No, but he did correct it. Rashad White ADP is going the last 7 days at the 610 in the main event, so he does go around early. But I really don't hate it. I wanted to ask you though. Going way back, because I meant to ask this guy we haven't talked about a lot, but old friend of yours, Miles Sanders. The health is a concern because I believe last year was his first healthy year since he entered the league. But flip side of this, that there's some positive buzzes. I know he has a rookie quarterback, but the Panthers' O-line was sneaky good last year. Their rush game, even after trading McCaffrey, Deontay Foreman and Chuba Hubbard put up really good numbers. Miles Sanders, he's hovering that 5th round. I know health is a big question mark for him, but they signed him to a nice little contract. They clearly believe in him. What are your thoughts on Miles Sanders this year? I don't think I've gotten your take at all. I'm intrigued to hear what you think of him.
He's not a guy I'm targeting a lot. I mean, I like Hubbard better as a better value, obviously, as a handcuff type of opportunity in a main event. I just don't know if I could trust Miles Sanders. I know they paid him. I know the rookie quarterback's going to depend on him, but he doesn't catch passes. He never caught passes in Philadelphia. It just makes no sense to me why he was one of the first people that got paid, especially with some of the other running backs that sat out there for a while and are still sitting out there for a while. I don't know if he's much different from Leonard Fournette personally. He had a good season last year with the Eagles, but I mean, a lot of that was just, Hurts playing out of his mind, the receivers on the outside. He doesn't have that in Carolina. I know the offensive line's better. I like Bryce Young. I think he's going to be a player in this league. But the receivers are a lot to be determined at this point. So who's really going to take the pressure off Miles Sanders? I like Hubbard better. Sanders is a guy that I'm not targeting much in these drafts.
Yeah, I think there's a good way to say it is the avenue for Miles Sanders to be a highly productive back isn't being talked about enough. I'm not saying that I'm necessarily in on him, but I think you look at it and kind of what that rush game did last year, and more than likely, I would assume that improved quarterback play, even with some weakness maybe at the receiver position, and the belief he signed the biggest running back contract this offseason. Just an interesting name, and he's kind of in that name we've talked about opening that 5th to 7th round. There's a lot of running back names we like. A guy who went in the 7th round, Alvin Kamara, first draft, I believe. Maybe not. We might have had a Fantasy Pros draft live a couple days ago with it. But your thoughts on Alvin Kamara, suspended 3 games, goes at the 7:02 today. Suspension, I think, is a little less than we thought. I think the number that was often thrown out there was 6 games. He gets 3. Derek Carr there, the new quarterback. I know you had said you were buying, I believe, months ago, you said you're buying the dip on him almost at discount. You don't mind him. He was going in the 10th round, sometimes 9th, 10th round. 7:02, what are your thoughts on Alvin Kamara?
I don't think he's a 7th round pick personally. I was buying a dip early in the season when there was so much questions when he was in the, like you said, talked about like the 10th round, 9th round type situation. I don't have that much of him. He's a guy that, looking through my portfolio the other day, I don't think he'll be added at this point, at this price. There's just too many guys there. I mean, you still have the annoyance of Taysom Hill. You still have the rookie Kendry Miller, who's off the pup list and looking good in practices. Mm-hmm. Jamal Williams, they gave money to, so he's going to have a role. So Kamara's going to be out for 3 games, and then what's he coming back to? He wasn't good last year outside of, a game or 2. So what makes anybody think he's going to come back and be the guy right away? I don't see it. I know they say he looked fresh in camp, but everybody looks fresh in camp in the first couple of weeks. When the wear and tear starts hitting, when he's sitting out 3 weeks, I don't see the Kamara 7th round love. He's a guy that I will not be, overexposed to.
The bigger concern with Kamara for me is obviously the 3-game suspension just piles on that, but did not look good last year. Just looked like just the wear and tear catching up to you. I think maybe there's some thoughts, maybe an improved quarterback play with Carr could get there. Maybe there's less of a focus on the run game by the defenses, but yeah, I mean, I just don't think it's the same Alvin Kamara that we've been seeing. Terp, some other names I want to talk to you about. 2 rookies go there in the start of the 8th round here, Quentin Johnson, Zay Flowers. Quentin Johnson, you weren't on, right? Where I was ribbing you on, I believe it was your Fantasy Pro stream. You might take
2 of them, Quentin Johnson and Jalen Hyatt.
Yeah.
Weren't on either of them.
Yeah, I was ribbing you. Yeah. But we talked about the situation. Quentin Johnson and Zay Flowers are 2 guys I've really talked myself into. I was never off Zay Flowers, but I think both of them, they're flashing in training camp by all reports to both of them. Obviously, Quentin Johnson is going to be in a high-powered offense. Zay Flowers has a chance to be the receiver 1 for a Baltimore offense that is expected to throw the ball more. Are these 2 guys you're buying, especially at this early 8th round ADP?
100% buy on Zay Flowers. He's my, I think, 2nd or 3rd most owned receiver. Love the situation there. The questions with Bateman, the injury concerns with Beckham. The new offense is supposed to be a lot more quick, up-tempo, high-powered, throwing the receivers more. Love Zay Flowers. Can't say enough, positive. Loved him coming out of college. Quinn Johnson, we talked about. He's not a guy like coming out of college. The TCU factor, being scorned in the past with, Rager and other guys who just didn't get it done in the pros. A lot of people say he was just, his catching ability was, very average. He made a lot of mistakes. He dropped a lot of balls at TCU, but obviously he has the big game breaking ability, which you saw, obviously in the college football playoff. Mm-hmm. But he landed in a nut spot with Justin Herbert and new offense, Kellen Moore, questions the receiver ahead of him with the injuries. I don't want to get sucked into like just a total trap, so I'm not going to be like crazy on him, but everything has seemed so perfect so far for Quentin Johnson. Does that translate when actually, week 1 comes around? I think it does. And I think Johnson's a guy that could easily, if, everything works out his way, lead that team in fantasy points, not Nate Eckler.
Wow. That's quite the pivot from our early conversations.
Early conversations, a lot changes. Like I said, I'm not going to put myself in a trap situation. Like, he'll never get to Zay Flowers on exposures, for me. But I could see, Zay Flowers right now is my number 1 rookie receiver on paper. Okay. The situation and a lot of stuff. But Quentin Johnson could easily top that mark.
So you have, where do you have Jackson Smith-Njigba?
He's 2nd on my list right now.
Okay, so So we always talk.
The 3 of them to me are just leaps and bounds right now above everybody else. There's other guys I like, but those 3 are just clear cut in my eyes. Especially Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers, I think, behind Christian Watson. I think it's Christian Watson. Who am I missing? I think it's Christian Watson and then Zay Flowers, to be honest, on the exposure list. I looked the other day. Nothing will ever top Christian Watson, but if it does, it'll be Zay Flowers.
Keeping it focused on kind of the rookie conversation here. Some conversation in the chat. Zach Charbonnet obviously went from out indefinitely to what positive news kind of out of nowhere because that's the Pete Carroll mantra, I guess. But Zach Charbonnet, Kenneth Walker is dinged up. Kenny McIntosh just announced today, I believe he's out for a couple of weeks. We're going to see a little bump in the next couple of weeks in Zach Charbonnet with all the other injuries.
I have no idea why we haven't seen it yet. I mean,
Yeah.
Charbonnet is definitely one of my highest owned, handcuffs, I guess you could call it. I think he has standalone value, but Kenneth Walker, everybody was buying the dip and everything. It was like the cool thing to do when when it was two of them and they were supposedly healthy. But I like the cheaper guy, and you never can trust Pete Carroll. I mean, a week or so ago, we were talking about Kenny McIntosh.
Yeah,
like Kenny McIntosh was a solid, player in college, but let's call it what it is. Like, he's not better than the top two. Walker with a groin injury, he's obviously banged up a little bit. I think he's fine. I don't think there's any worry about missing games, but groin injuries are no joke, and they could linger and easily re-injure. If things go a little haywire for Walker. So 9th round, like Charbonnet, I'll take him as much as I can. I definitely have more Charbonnet than I do Walker.
Rich Billy, I believe, is leaving me hanging in the chat. I'm very intrigued to hear what he said, but Turp, you would be the guy maybe to know. They're talking about the injuries with Seattle and how it's just seems like a off-season occurrence every year. They said it's probably the way they practice. And then Rich Billy was asking, did anyone see what Rashad Penny was saying about practice? I'm assuming in Philly versus Seattle. I'm intrigued to see what Rashad Penny said. I don't know if you know, but then it leads me to a question about Rashad Penny, another guy who's been getting some positive buzz. Obviously, the love was Swift on the trade when it happened because we know the talent DeAndre Swift possesses. But Rashad Penny also has his talent, and maybe their wonder is maybe if Philly, which is last year the best team in the league at preventing injuries, something whatever they're doing was working. Is there maybe a way that this now in Philly, a team that is noted for not only the way they practice but just something to do in injury prevention? Rashad Penny, the Swift talent is tantalizing, but obviously Rashad Penny, I think you've seen a little bit of jump in those two. So I think I asked you this a month ago. We kind of keep it like maybe a monthly occurrences. What's the state of the Eagles backfield, and at their respective ADPs, who do you want more?
I mean, I pretty much eliminated Kenny Gainwell, from draft. I can't say eliminated, but to me, it's a Swift and Penny show. So many things need to go right for Gainwell to be fantasy relevant. I like Swift the most personally, but Penny is a really, really good value right now in drafts. And he has, if there was, let's just hypothetically say Swift wasn't there, and if it's just Penny, Gainwell, and Scott, Penny has top 5 running back upside if he's healthy. He has never shown he's healthy. But I saw the quote that he came out with the other day. He's just saying how Philadelphia training staff and the Philadelphia coaching staff is working on with him, like taking care of his body, doing things that like he never did in Seattle to make sure he's healthy. Different techniques, different, movements that he never did in Seattle. So to me, I mean, Penny could be one of the best values in draft right now. I mean, he got drafted in the 9th round. It's a perfect type of setup because we know that Eagles have the best offensive line in football. That's not debatable. And yeah, you have the Hurts annoying 1-yard touchdowns, but if you have a guy like Penny who could take a little bit of the brunt off, Hurts getting hit all these times, it could be a perfect storm.
Would you say that the Eagles are actually going to...
Wait, real quick, did I miss news on Jeff Wilson? I know he got dinged up in practice yesterday, but he came right back. I saw Rich said something about Wilson's knee I don't remember that. Yes, unless it happened today. It could have happened today. I haven't really been by the computer on Twitter today. But
I can look it up for you.
I know A-Chain was a little banged up. Coaching staff said it was nothing, but yeah, Jeff Wilson, I don't think is hurt. I hope he's
Jeff
not.
Wilson,
I've been adding him a lot lately.
Just head to the locker room on Saturday. Was the last?
Yeah, and then he came right back on the sideline. He got a carry after the fact, so I don't think there's anything serious with Jeff Wilson. I hope that's wrong.
Rich Billy's checking for us because I don't think he came back, but he's double checking.
I follow a bunch of beat writers in for the Dolphins because obviously I'm following that backfield, with A-Chain.
That backfield very well could all be hurt
and I don't want anybody getting hurt in the preseason because if anybody gets hurt in the preseason, then we have the annoyance of Dalvin Cook, which I don't want anywhere near that team. So I'm hoping he's wrong. I would love for him to be wrong. I hope that Jeff Wilson's fine because I want them to continue to be, solid, guys to add, especially late in drafts, because if that backfield stays the way it is, one of those guys, and that whether it's Jeff Wilson, whether it's Mostert, whether it's A-Chain, are going to be massive, massive league winners.
Real quick, before we get back to Dolphins running back conversation, which I'm sure everyone is eager to hear, I want to ask you, from what you've been hearing and what you think, right? You've seen every Eagles game, many of them in person. Is there a little like the chatter that they're going to try and limit Jalen Hurts' rushing workload and work around the goal line and try and run the ball more there with other guys? Because again, right, he got banged up down the stretch. Is that real, or is that we hit the season and it's like, no, we're gonna keep running this guy? Or
they might try to same thing with Josh Allen. I keep hearing that too. They're going to stop his rushing ability and stop his goal line work and all that stuff. And it's obviously something you keep in mind. Like there's no need for Jalen Hurts to be taking hits on 1 yard touchdown on 1st and 1 from the 1 ever. When you have the offensive line, when you have the stable of running backs they do early in the season, literally ever. Playoffs, that's different. Or like obviously down the stretch when you need to get wins. But I can see it happening early in the season. It's possible. If it doesn't work, you're going to see Jalen Hurts just getting pushed in the end zone every play he gets. So it's definitely a worry. Like with Penny and with Swift, you have that worry because if Jalen Hurts, ever did take a step back, man, those guys would be getting drafted a lot higher, and that would be very scary for both of them in a positive way.
Another popular training camp discussion right now is the Chiefs receivers and this idea that one of them should break out. You would think Kadarius Toney, you've been opened as that's the guy that you understand why people are drafting him with the talent, but that's the guy you're content to let beat you. But Sky Moore has been getting a lot of positive buzz. Travis Kelce got quotes this week that Rashee Rice and the talent that he's possessed and has been killing it at training camp. Who's the Chiefs receiver that you're most comfortable taking at their respective ADP right now? Because I know Rashee Rice is probably coming soon. Sky Moore goes at the 904, Toney at the 812. Or is this just going to be kind of like last year and it's really just going to be Travis Kelce?
We talked about this a bunch of times especially on this show, we talk about guys who are moving up draft boards with preseason hype. Sky Moore is one of them. I mean, Sky Moore has been flying up draft boards. I think he can fly up even more. All I keep hearing and through beat writers and obviously camp reports is the only two guys who are like kind of lock and stone right now playing almost every first team snap are MVS, who let's just call it what it is. You're not drafting him with any confidence, and Sky Moore. So when you hear that stuff, it's hard not to get on board with Sky Moore. I mean, you're hearing the Richie James, the Justin Rosses, Rashee Rice is a rookie. I get that. And, obviously he's having a good camp, but you don't know if you can, actually depend on that. I keep hearing Justin Watson's name. I'm not ever going to worry about him. But Sky Moore is definitely the guy to draft. I mean, first year as a rookie, he was a massive disappointment. People, including myself, that really, really, really liked Sky Moore last year, totally flopped. Early, kind of an early round draft pick. He definitely went in the top 10 rounds of a lot of drafts early, and especially late, just totally flopped. So this year, I feel like he's been getting a lot of positive, press, and he's the guy that I'm owning. Kadarius Toney, I put a tweet out, and I stand by the tweet, and I will not back off the tweet. I've had a bunch of opportunities to take him at great values and continue to pass him. If he beats me, he beats me. I can't. It's just so the talent's there. I still remember that Dallas game. It's just game-breaking ability, but can't stay healthy. Knee issues already. I'll pass.
Terp, I just want to clarify in the chat. People are asking if you're drafting at the 101 this draft. Terp is not in this draft. We're broadcasting it.
You will see none of Terp main event drafts on this stream.
And not on this.
I keep my main event drafts under wraps, incognito. No
Terp
talking.
can't get sniped like he does in best ball and fantasy.
No, I would handle things a lot different in a best ball 125 draft, getting swiped like I did the last one we did, the Fantasy Pros draft, when I got lost Herbert and Jackson when I set it up perfectly. And that if that was a main event, I'm gonna have a couple choice words on here for the owners that did that. That would get me in trouble.
Speaking of upcoming live draft coverage, I probably should have said this earlier, but might as well say it now. We got some big things cooking. As I said, every Sunday night we'll be having main event draft coverage. Every Tuesday night is Fantasy Pros Championship coverage. August 15th, we have a Superflex Best Ball draft coverage. Our first time doing a Superflex. We'll have some guests on for that who are very well versed in the Superflex world. And then August 23rd, at 8 p.m., we'll be having a live Dynasty startup, and we'll be having, again, a lot of guys who are known for their Dynasty content on the show to discuss that draft. So we got some big things cooking. Superflex, Dynasty, Fantasy Pros, obviously.
It's going to be a busy month of August.
Busy month. And then it's all going to really culminate. We'll always be having, kind of like we did last year, we're going to cover some of the live drafts in Vegas, those live boards. And we're also going to be doing, I believe, Labor Day weekend, we'll be having kind of our own special draft-a-thon, and we're going to cover like 3 or 4 drafts just in one day, which is putting us through the ringer, but we do it for you, the viewers.
We will both be in Vegas. We will both be, going over some of these crazy drafts that are going on, whether it's, the bare knuckle drafts, whether it's the 10K leagues, the monster buy-in leagues, the main events on almost every day that FFPC offers. We'll be looking at draft boards, posting draft boards, giving commentary on draft boards. It's going to be a fun couple of days. I'm excited to get back out there, see a couple people that, I haven't seen in a while. So it'll definitely be a good time. And I love Vegas. It's my favorite place in the world.
People in the chat saying the Superflex Best Ball, they're in for that. All you got to do is go to the Superflex Best Ball tournament at myffpc.com. Scroll down. It should be listed as live on FFPC YouTube. Sign up for that specific draft. And that's a draft that will be broadcasted live. And hey, if you wanted to come join the show and discuss your draft live, me and Turp would love to have you. So get in that. These spots are going to go quickly. These live on FFPC YouTube drafts really fill so much quicker than
very, very quickly.
Like,
there's never an issue with these not filling. So if you want to get in and you want me to commentate on your team and tell you how good or how awful it is, I will be happy
to. You will take that for
in a nice way, constructively.
Looking at it, I want to go back. I want to scroll up because let me get it. But I'm just off the bat. Team 8. We've been talking about the thing. I just want to commend. I'm liking Team 8's draft. Mainly, I'm gonna like any team that does that gets to a late because I've been on that all year. But talk to me about Team 8. I'm a big fan of what they're cooking. I know it's rare to see kind of 5 running backs in a row, but I'm a fan of all the running backs that they took, and then coming around with Dotson, Williams, and Rondale Moore, all who I think have really high upside. This is a way to build a team. Big fan.
It's definitely a different way to build a team. They still haven't taken a tight end yet, which is
some teams punt on tight end in this draft.
Yeah, punt and tight end, like I've said on best ball, you can get away with it. You can take 3, 4, 5 guys, whatever you want to do. You get a little, crazy, especially late. There's a lot of these guys we talked about already. But in a managed league, you have to click a button. You have to click the button that actually says who you're going to start. And you're usually going to be wrong if you punt the position through 13 rounds almost.
Yeah,
you've taken, I don't know.
Flip side, I'm not saying it's supposed to go, but flip side is we've also talked about how we love a lot of these names.
I love them. I can easily join this guy in almost every draft that I do and do the same thing that he did. I love the way he structured his team. I mean, I think he's probably one running back too much personally, but like when you get down to these tight ends, it's just like each week you have to make a decision. He's stacked everywhere else. I mean, his quarterback room is real solid, especially with Lamb and Waddle. The running backs, like them all, they all could be, very, very solid contributors to the team. Dotson makes a ton of sense as a third receiver. Jameson Williams is a league winner if he gets there. So, we talk about this. It's just when it comes to this, you got to start one tight end. You're going to be drafting Michael Mayer, Cade Otton, Hunter Henry, Trey McBride, guys like that. And I like all the 4 names I said, but like you have to pick one every week, and that could be very difficult. And you don't want to get stuck behind these top teams like Kelsey and Andrews, be a 20-point hole when you're playing head to head. That puts you in a lot of losses, picking the wrong guy every week.
A couple of quick questions for you related to teams in the DMV. J.K. Dobbins got another guy who kind of is dipping, right? He's fallen a bit. He's had some injury concerns. I think I talked about on my last Frisbee Joe stream I was on that he elected to get his knee cleanup surgery because he had like a vision come to him at 3 a.m., which is maybe not what you want to hear. But are you buying a little dip at all on J.K. Dobbins?
I'm buying all the dip on J.K. Dobbins. I don't think there's any way he sits out. I mean, is there an injury risk? Obviously, there could be. Obviously, getting, like you said, having an epiphany at 3 a.m. is never a good thing, no matter what situation you're in. But I would guess he'd have to have some conversation with his team to be just doing this. So my guess is he's back, pretty quickly. I heard he's trying to get paid more. I don't know what leverage he has compared to some of these other guys.
Yeah.
So Gus Edwards, Melvin Gordon behind, not adding anybody. To me, Dobbins is going to get a little bit of a raise. Same type of situation with Saquon. Maybe not as much money, but J.K. Dobbins is a dip right now that I'm all in on.
My second DMV football team related question. We talked a lot about our love for Antonio Gibson and that running back room and what Bieniemy does. I'm not a believer in Sam Howell. Jacoby Brissett is, I think, the clear better quarterback, but the flip side is, why would the Commanders ever do that? Because if you see what you got in Howell, and if he stinks, all right, we're in the Caleb Williams sweepstakes. But my point is, Terry McLaurin, he goes at the 504. Jahan Dotson goes at the 805. Another guy I've been seeing a lot of positive buzz on is Jahan Dotson. So Terry McLaurin's been posting some insane clips of some of the catches he's making. What are your thoughts on those Commanders receivers? I know you're also kind of in as a late round dart on the tight ends with what Bieniemy does, but specifically Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson at their respective ADPs. At all any interest from you, or are you scared of that offensive situation?
I'm a Dotson guy over Terry. I mean, he's cheaper. I saw it last year a lot more with him. I mean, I'm a Hal guy. I think Hal's going to be – I don't think he's going to be a superstar in any means, but I think he's much better than Brissett. I think he's going to keep the team in games. We talked about the tight end position, and, I've drafted a couple of those guys. I thought Logan Thomas got hurt the other day. That's definitely a worry. I think it was a calf injury.
Yeah.
Somebody there, the tight end position with Eric Bieniemy is going to have a fancy impact. I'm not saying they're going to be a top 5 guy or top 10 guy or even a top 15 guy, but going to be a serviceable late round pick when somebody emerges. The question is just who. When you come to Dotson, or McLaren, I like Dotson better. I just feel like getting him 7th round, 8th round in these drafts, it just makes more sense as a wide receiver 4. In most teams, they're going to struggle in that division. I think they're the worst team by a good margin, but I just think Hal's going to figure it out to where he's going to keep these guys fantasy viable.
In the chat, William McMiller saying he's in a slow draft in the Fantasy Pros Championship, which is also home to $1 million grand prize, and he got J.K. Dobbins at the 703, which is just
outstanding,
phenomenal. That offense.
You look at some of these teams, like I'll just go to Team 9. I think their build's a little, overkill, but let's just say they took Adams, or they think they started St. Brown, Adams, Allen, Judy, Herbert, Ayuk, and you could have put Dobbins in the 7th, in the 8th, any of these rounds, and it just makes total sense for this build to get Dobbins there. When realistically, if he was healthy and in camp, he should be going in the 5th round, maybe higher. I saw him get moved up in the 4th round some drafts. I don't think there's any drawback to take J.K. Dobbins. You could always, if you're really that nervous about him, you could take one of his backups in the 18th, 19th round for free, because that's what they are right now.
Yeah.
Free.
Sir, trying to find a question I want to ask you. It was on the tip of my tongue, and now it's on. There it is. Jamal Williams and Kendre Miller. Jamal Williams goes at the 1105. Kendre Miller goes at the 12. I think I'm going to know your answer. You're down on Alvin Kamara, especially in the 7th round, is kind of where he's getting pushed up to. Does that mean you're in on one of Jamal Williams or Kendre Miller? If I know you, I'm assuming it's the explosive rookie, but I'm intrigued to hear your thoughts on those two guys.
It's definitely Kendre Miller. I mean, I loved him coming out of TCU. He landed in a really good spot, obviously with Kamara having a down year. Jamal Williams you saw last year, was the absolute perfect storm. It's just not going to be like that again. I mean, how many times did St. Brown fall down the 1-yard line? How many times did they take Swift out and put Williams in for the 1-yard touchdown? If you eliminated let's just say a handful of his touchdowns, he's not fantasy relevant in any way. Everything worked out perfectly. It's not going to be like that for the Saints. Their offensive line is not as good as the Lions. Yeah, I know they could be in some positive game scripts in that division, which stinks. But I think Kendre Miller will eventually take that job, and he's a guy that I feel like will be starting on Atlanta. He's a lot of guy that will be starting on a lot of teams down the stretch in Fantasy Pros and Main Event, $1 million runs. Okay. I feel like he's a guy that will break away from that pack it'll be him and Kamara, Jamal Williams mixed in here and there. But I think Kendra Miller is the guy that you should be owning right now. He's a guy that I got off a little bit because I was worried about his injury. He opened the camp on the PUP list, but since he got off it, everything seems to be positive right now with him. He has, 3-down ability, and with that team, I feel like he's the guy that will emerge out of the three.
Terp, I think I heard you talking on Thursday in your fantasy pros draft, but I'm going to ask it again. Who's going to be the Bears running back to own? Or is it going to be just a three-headed, maybe not monster, but just a 3 running back committee backfield where maybe there's no guy to start, especially in a weekly managed format? Is there going to be
I think
one
it's just an absolute just unknown right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm drafting all of them, like with any confidence. Not really. I like Herbert.
So you want to own all of them?
I'm going to own all of them. I think one of them will have value. I mean, Foreman obviously has a little bit of an injury history. Herbert, does the team really like him? They added 2 guys. I like Roschon Johnson, but he's a rookie, and he didn't really play a ton of snaps at Texas, obviously being behind Bijan Robinson. So you have that worry there. I'm going to mix them all in. Am I going to fall in love with any of them? Probably not. I just like the Fields, DJ Moore, even Mooney a little bit. It just makes too much sense on, that. I think they could take that next step. But from a running perspective, like, I'll have Herbert probably more than the rest of them. And then I've owned Foreman was a guy that I was kind of ignoring, but, diving a little bit more into it. He's a guy that I'll mix in a little bit more than I have. But at the end of the day, it's not a running back room that I'm really in love with. I don't really feel like there's a game breaker in there.
Terp, an offense, I think in some ways rightfully hasn't been talked about at all. But flip side of it, granted they could just be in a bunch of 16 to 10 games, but their division is loaded with offensive firepower. They may be down in a lot of games. The New England Patriots, who Bill O'Brien's back, the offense should be better because there's theoretically a competent offensive coordinator running it. Mac Jones, ball reports, is looking way better than he did last year, as he should, because again, he has a legitimate offensive coordinator. Someone you would think, besides Ramondre, who has questions marks with their interest in some of these free agent running backs, someone from the passing game you would think is going to maintain kind of week-to-week relevance. Dare I say it, is Juju Smith-Schuster maybe at some point in this 11th round like it was today, not that bad of a pick? Is Hunter Henry, who our friend who's appeared on our live draft card, Bradley Staller's in love with? Is Mike Gesicki? Who's the guy in New England to own? And maybe you can disagree with me. You're saying, Aiden, no one's going to be fantasy relevant there. But if someone is, who is most likely of the pass catchers to be?
Obviously, we talked about Ramondre. I think he's clear-cut number 1.
Yeah, putting him.
But after that, I don't think there's going to be one. People are getting the Juju's train starting to, take off this week. He has the relationship with Mac Jones. He's free in drafts. We know where I stand with Juju. He's not a number 1 receiver on any team. Patrick Mahomes ain't throwing the ball. He made him anyway relevant last year, and he still was very, very average. Mm-hmm. Mac Jones is not Patrick Mahomes. Bill O'Brien is not Eric Bieniemy and Andy Reid. Devontae Parker, if I had a pick, would be the receiver that I would target. I still think Thornton has potential.
Okay.
He's getting pushed down and pushed down and pushed down, and even more. They're saying Kendrick Bourne could be the second receiver there. I'll believe that when I see it. But if I had a pick, it's still Hunter Henry. I think Hunter Henry and Gesicki. I like Gesicki too. I think they both could be fantasy relevant. I feel like it's going to be more of a tight end centered offense. I feel like Henry could be a fringe tight end 1. I think there's the potential there. He'll be on the field a ton, and you've seen it in the past. With Mac Jones, the potential's there. It's just the offensive coordinator has always been a disaster. So to me, it's Hunter Henry. But if you had a gun to my head, I would say nobody.
Jake Ferguson goes here in the 14th round. It's interesting because, he is going to be the guy for Dallas. But at some point, we have to consider that no Kellen Moore there. Maybe there's less of reliance or less of a usage of the tight end within the scheme. Obviously, in this 14th round, I'm not knocking any pick taken this late, right? You take the value because that could be a high-powered offense. They have the names there. But basically, my question is, do you think the Dallas tight end, assumably Ferguson, is going to have an impact, or are we kind of just overthinking it due to a past offensive system?
I don't think we're overthinking it, to be honest with you. I mean, I wasn't really crazy about him because they drafted the rookie out of Michigan, who recently, had some injury setbacks, who's not ready to go yet in camp. So the Ferguson love is, to me, warranted right now. I mean, do I worry about Mike McCarthy calling plays? Of course. I think Dallas could easily be a dumpster fire this year with him running the show. But Ferguson is going to have opportunity, and that's all you ask for. You saw what Dalton Schultz did in this offense. Ferguson can be that guy. So in the 14th round, as a backup tight end, it looks like this team will have him and Johnson. Both of those guys have potential. I mean, it's a tough week start who you're picking, put in there. But I feel like Ferguson definitely has ability, and he's a guy that I'm okay taking now.
Terp sidebar, me and a friend were talking about today. As a diehard Eagles fan, as the viewers well know, what teams in the NFC do you think, barring injury to Jalen Hurts, God forbid, what teams in the NFC can realistically beat the Eagles in the playoffs? I think it generally may just be the Niners. Is that it?
Nobody.
So you're
in Philadelphia? Nobody.
So if they don't make the Super Bowl, it's just a complete abject failure of a season, and you're questioning, how do we not make the Super Bowl?
Unless there's a catastrophic injury, like you said, Jalen Hurts, that's obvious. But like if something happened to A.J. Brown or Devonta Smith, somebody would have to emerge here. Right? That's a massive worry. But obviously you have Lane Johnson and Mailata. There's too many, Darius Slay or something like that. But to me, it's Super Bowl, making it to the Super Bowl or bust. I mean, San Francisco love. I'm not. I think they have a ton of talent. They have, offense, defense. But I don't trust the quarterback. I don't care who they put back there. Brock Purdy is not coming into Philadelphia in the playoffs healthy for a full game and ever winning. So the 49ers, they're probably the most talented team. But besides them, nobody. I mean, Seattle, Geno could take the next step maybe, but not really. The whole Saints division, no. The whole, Bears, Vikings crew, no. If I had to pick somebody and it's not the 49ers, I would say maybe the Giants. Daniel Jones takes the next step, but
no.
I'm fishing here. It's definitely not Dallas. So if somebody's waiting for the Dallas, love. I know they got Gilmore in the offseason and Brandon Cooks and all these cool names, but who's still their quarterback? Who's still their coach? I'm okay. I'll bet against Dak and Mike McCarthy every day of the week. Fly, Eagles, fly. Super Bowl or bust.
Yeah, that was a dumb question on me to get you sidetracked. Let's get it back fantasy wise in this draft. And Eric Prince goes.
I love getting sidetracked. It very much.
I mean, I knew what I was doing. That was a poor hosting job by me. That was in my head. It's like, where this is going. This is going to become an Eagles propaganda piece. But it's also the truth. It was just a genuine question that popped into my head. And as you know, we like to just kind of talk shop, right? So that popped in. But I want to ask you, Eric Prince, he goes in the 15th round. Talk about a guy who's rising up. Is this Isaiah Pacheco 2.0 in terms of a Chiefs running back who kind of flies up out of nowhere, gets the training camp buzz, and actually delivers? Or is this a kind of a fool's gold where just this lightning doesn't strike twice?
I mean, it's definitely an option. I mean, it's definitely something that you worry about a little bit. If you're a Pacheco owner, I mean, CEH is free in drafts right now. McKinnon is a guy that not a soul has talked about. Don't worry. He's going to get drafted here. So he got drafted. 16th round, right up your alley. Make sure you take a picture. If he scores any touchdowns this year, you're just going to get tweet after tweet after tweet of people just sending pictures and gifs of him and just.
I expect him to start off the first 2 weeks of the season scoring touchdowns, and people are like, "Oh, maybe this is the year," and then he'll stink per usual.
This is definitely a year where, I'm probably higher than you think on CEH when it comes to percentage wise. But he's free in drafts, and you're betting on somebody emerging there, and it's like I don't really trust Pacheco.
The worst.
I mean, he's a very average running back who just burst on the scene last year, and it looked perfect, but he's still not healthy. The rookie has potential. Prince, he was getting a lot of positive press in camp, and Andy Reid's not afraid to throw somebody out there. You saw it last year. I still go back to nobody talks about Jerick McKinnon. He has not been mentioned on any podcast. He hasn't been mentioned on any show. Nobody talks about the guy. It's like the guy doesn't exist.
Was it the
guy literally won? He won millions of dollars for people last year. Literally, he just gets ignored. It's shocking. It's probably one of the most shocking things of the fantasy football season so far. I know he's older. I know he's
He
he
goes
pretty
at the
much begged to come
905. I
back
don't know how
there.
much you can say he's being ignored. People aren't talking about him, but he's going within the first half of the draft. I think there's part
Why
of it
isn't he
that
getting drafted? Why isn't he get drafted high? Where did he get drafted
I
here?
think
He got
he went up to
drafted.
905 today.
No, that's higher than I've seen him go.
I just
But
think
like
I think there's an
nobody,
unpredictability to when he's going to be useful, and you just never know when he's going to be used a ton. Like he could go from getting no carries one week and barely being on the field to having 3 touchdowns and 8 catches out of nowhere. And I think in a managed format, that's way tougher to manage. That's just
I
my
agree.
take.
I mean, I don't disagree with you, and I've heard like bits and pieces that they're going to try to save him, for when it counts at the end of the season. He's not going to get a lot of workload early in the season, which I could see happening easily. But I don't know. I mean, he's a guy that I probably have more exposure than I should. But like, I'm starting to get worried that like nobody, like every show I listen to, and I listen to a ton of shows, try to get a little, make sure I'm not missing certain players. And nobody ever mentions him. He's never in like the what if questions or like the who would you pick out of these 4 guys. He's never even mentioned, which is it's just shocking to me because, like I said, last year the guy won people millions of dollars everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Jerick McKinnon's going to follow the same blueprint every year. Does nothing like the first half of the season, and then becomes a popular waiver add-on after a big week, and then we did like playoff rounds. It just is delivering for fantasy owners. Couple of comments about Deneric Prince in the chat when we did just talk about him. Yeah, he's been playing well. I think with my last thought on Deneric Prince is kind of like what we saw with Pacheco is eager to see where the preseason games when they start hitting, how they're using him, how much they're using him, who's he running with. That's going to be interesting.
1,000%. If
That's when
he's
the
he's
Pacheco
getting
took
snaps
off.
with Patrick Mahomes in preseason right now in practices,
Yep.
and that's cool and all. But do they trust him enough to put him out there with Patrick Mahomes in the preseason? If he's out there, one snap is just all you need. If you see him out there one snap, they trust him. He's a good guy to take a shot on. And in these leagues where you can waive people, hey, you'll see it real quickly. If Prince isn't out there, he's a guy that probably is not going to make it on your team long. But if he's playing snaps with Patrick Mahomes, that means Andy Reid, who is right now the best coach in football, trusts him. And if he trusts him, guess where he's going to be? On the field. And if you can get a situation like Pacheco was last year, you could be talking about, just like McKinnon, league winners. This Kansas City offense is no joke. And with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid running the show, these guys are fantasy relevant. They shouldn't be.
If he follows the Pacheco path, what's going to happen is right. I think Pacheco started. You heard the training camp buzz. You first saw him kind of pops up in that 18th, 19th, 20th round. You see it, you make note of it, and then slowly but surely it creeps up 14th.
Moving.
15th.
I mean, he was up there real.
Yeah,
And he
but then
never
what
got like in the
happened?
top 10 rounds, but he
But then he
moved.
spiked after the one preseason game where Mahomes did play, and Pacheco was out there with the starters. He got caught a pass from Mahomes, and that was when it's skyrocketed. Literally in 24 hours, it was then he's going 8 to 9.
100%.
So I mean, that the Derek Prince is going to be a big preseason story. Just and how they use him, who they use him with, more importantly. We kind of talked about it. Just get pitched. We talked about Tank Dell a lot and the Texans receivers. On the Hardway draft, which is a while ago now, time flies. We talked to Abib Akitoba, who's a back-to-back fantasy purse championship winner, about Dalton Schultz and his thoughts. And I always think back to how he says someone is going to be relevant from the Texans in that receiving core. I'm big on Dalton Schultz. I love Tank Dell. I'm open about them, especially with the value. But John Mechie's having a great story in camp. Have to root for the guy. Beat cancer. Was a beast at Alabama, right? John Mechie, just as good as Devonta Smith in college, and I stand by that. Like obviously Smith won the Heisman, but the reason
I
Devonta
watched
Smith
every Alabama game those years.
the reason
I'm a little
Devonta
bit of a
Smith the
closet
only reason
Alabama
Devonta
fan,
Smith
but
won a Heisman was because John Mechie got hurt that year.
that's fair. I mean, I
That's
could maybe
that's
see
not fair. That's completely true.
I could see where you're going with this, and that's fair. And I'm a John Mechie guy. I think he could easily him, Nico Collins, Tank Dell. I think they're very, very underrated. Yeah, they might not be ready right now, but somebody on that team is going to be a fantasy football force this year.
Yep.
And my money on as of right now is Mechie. I mean, do I like Tank Dell? I like Tank Dell. I'm not going to sit here and say I don't, but he's a rookie that is going to take a little bit. I don't think he's going to be right, thrown to the fire. They still have Dusty Robert Woods there. So he's going to be
always
annoying
forget
early.
about that. Always forget about Robert Woods.
It's going to be annoying early. Nico Collins isn't going anywhere. So, you're talking about a guy who realistically, Mechie or Tank Dell, who's probably going to be the wide receiver 3 on that team to start off, and that doesn't even include Dalton Schultz. So when it's all said and done, I think Mechie's going to be the guy. Like you said, extremely talented, one of the best route runners, at Alabama. The injury screwed everything up for him, and obviously the health issues was obviously a big worry. I like him. He's having a good camp. I like C.J. Stroud. He's a best ball target of mine. He's probably, I think, as of right now, my number 1 quarterback owned, which will be surprising to most. But another guy who's free in drafts. So Mechie is my guy if I had a pick. But I like all of them. Nico Collins and no slouch. But he's just going a little. He's kind of up there in the range where it's a little uncomfortable. Where did he get drafted here? He got drafted 11th round, which is not bad. I saw him going the 9th round of one of these drafts recently. That's too rich for my blood comparing, some of the guys he's against. And Tank Dell's the ultimate punt. Is he going to win you a game week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Probably not, but he could be a guy that emerges by the end of the season. It could be, a guy that's in your fantasy pros or main event, lineups that is chasing $1 million.
So we agree that we both think that John Mechie, that someone there's opportunity. I vehemently disagree. I know you're a Bama guy and you watch that. John Mechie's stats were better. Eye test showed they were similar. And again, only reason Devonta Smith was a Heisman is because John Mechie wasn't there to just absolutely be a beast next to him. There's something they said is coming off a torn ACL and you're still drafted in the 2nd round. And then you beat cancer and then you ball out at the next training camp. Dude's a talent. I think we forget about that because it's been essentially 2 years off from football, which is
You
concerning.
forgot about him last year. I mean, he was a guy that early on, before the whole health issues came up, that people were drafting. I drafted him in a couple of these drafts and got burned, obviously, because he had the issues with the health.
Mm-hmm.
But it happens, and you wish him nothing but the best. And he seems like he's kicking cancer in the butt, and he seems to be out there and he's looking healthy. Obviously, coming off the injury. Wish him nothing but the best. I hope he emerges. I mean, like I said, he was an incredible talent at Alabama. I mean, that's a factory of wide receivers. It's extremely rare when any of those guys bust. I mean, some of the best in the league right now are off from Alabama: Judy, Ridley, Amari Cooper. We can keep going on the list of just Devonta Smith,
back in the years.
Julio. I mean, there's just it's a factory of just talent.
Jameson Williams.
I mean, it's crazy the amount of talent coming from that school when it comes to the receiver position.
Them in Ohio State, it's nuts.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Ohio State. I mean, Olave, Wilson. I mean, JSN. Keep going on the list of guys who are just studs, absolute studs in this league, and they're not going anywhere anytime soon.
Mechie. I think it's obviously when you have 2 years off coming off an ACL, it's just who knows. But theoretically, if he returns to form, probably the most talented receiver on that team. He was
100%, 1,000%. Yeah. I mean, Nico Collins is never going to be, do I think he's a good, solid 2 receiver?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do I think he's an alpha? I don't. Mechie has a chance to be the alpha. If him and Stroud can figure it out, obviously there's going to be some growing pains early in the season and training camp and all that stuff. But it could be really, really nice for fantasy owners to take Mechie, in drafts this late and 16th round. You're talking about potential number 1 receiver on a team in the 16th round.
John Mechie may be one of the lottery tickets that you always stand for. He might be him. I love Tank Dell too, but I do think Tank Dell in some ways is capped a bit in year 1 and what he can do. But Mechie has crazy high ceiling. Terp, as much as you can in the 16th round, buy or sell Justin Ross as much as you can, because again, it's a 16th round. But are you buying?
I mean, I just drafted him in my fantasy pros draft. What they did with Balky on Thursday. The upside's there, talent's there. The injuries, it's the massive worry for me. I mean, he hasn't really. He hasn't really I love the talent, but he hasn't really. Who's he playing over? Where is Justin Ross's fit on this team? Unless he just Justin Ross, his avenue to success on this team is Patrick Mahomes come out and say, I want this guy to play.
Yeah.
Does that happen? Does Mahomes have that clout to make a guy, make a team? I hope so, because I've been drafting Ross a lot more recently. But the worry is is he playing over Sky Moore early? No. Is he playing over MVS early? No. If Kadarius Toney's healthy, is he playing over him? No. We all know Kelsey, obviously. So where is his fit at to where he's going to be an impact fantasy-wise? He's a lottery ticket. He's with Patrick Mahomes. If he was, let's just hypothetically say I don't know, with the Raiders, you wouldn't even be mentioning his name. The only reason you're mentioning his name right now is because of Patrick Mahomes. So if you ask me like Justin Ross versus Jalen Hyatt, it's Jalen Hyatt 100 times out of 100.
Okay.
Based off opportunity.
Luke Musgrave, we talked about earlier how he's been getting a bunch of preseason buzz and great news. He's going at the 1903 in the last week in this format. Today goes at the 1709. So you're seeing that little bump. I know we talked about rookie tight ends, and you talked a lot about Kincaid, Laporta. Can you dive a little deeper into Musgrave? Because you're high on the Packers offense.
Very high on the Packers offense, and I will stay high on the Packers offense. That's not changing. Early on with Musgrave, all you heard about was he can't catch, he's dropping the ball. But the thing that has never changed is he is the starter. He is going to be a guy that's going to be on the field. He's going to be a guy that I like coming out of school. Ton of potential. Obviously, the tight end position is a hard position to learn in the NFL because it's not just going and catching passes. You got to block. And, some of these guys just aren't ready to, about that life. So they got to learn. But the one thing about him and all those guys in Green Bay is opportunity. Who is the veteran guy that's going to be pushing to take your job? Nobody. Tucker Kraft, I believe, is the only other tight end that is in any way a worry on that team. So is there a world you can tell yourself a story where it's Christian Watson, Musgrave as the top two pass catchers on the team? I can easily tell myself that story. And in the 17th round, of course, he's a rookie. But for a guy who's at 89% snaps, geez, I mean, it just makes so much sense to draft a guy like that in the 17th round, you said. It seems like just too hard to pass up, especially if you're starting off with like a Kelsey, Mark Andrews, Hawkinson, type of situation where you probably aren't taking a tight end for a while. Musgrave just seems the highest upside player that's just late, right there with like, Trey McBride, who I've talked about before. It just makes so much sense.
Looking at the 18th round, especially in this managed format where you can drop a guy, right? And pick other people up if something happens, is kind of getting one of these Colts backup running backs not required, but important to you because Jonathan Taylor comes back. Just drop Evan Hall, drop Deion Jackson. What are your thoughts? They both go in the 18th round here.
If you're drafting a main event right now, I feel like it's like these guys are getting drafted, like you said, in the 18th round. They're not guys who are you're spending early capital on. If you're telling me Deion Jackson and Evan Hall were getting drafted in like the top 12 rounds, I'd say, yeah, I'll just let somebody else take them. But in the 18th round, you can easily draft. You can easily cut these guys. And let's just hypothetically say Jonathan Taylor gets traded and nobody of relevance comes back. Or he just doesn't, just holds out for whatever reason. You're talking about a massive edge over the field that guys who are drafting when most of us are drafting at the end of the season won't get. So, like, people always say, like, why are you drafting a $2,000 main event entry on August 6th? It's for examples like this. Evan Hall, Deion Jackson. Two guys that in 2-3 weeks from now, you'll have more clarity on the Taylor situation and you won't even consider either you'll consider them higher or they won't even be on your draft board. So it's worth a shot, especially a guy like Deion Jackson, who has shown you flashes, last year, they weren't anything special, but, a couple of spike weeks here and there is all you need, from an 18th round draft pick. That's just where the advantage comes with drafting right now.
Let's say Jonathan Taylor's trade, which seems unlikely, hold out, which seems possible. Let's say that it's a clear he's not starting the season with them. Where do you think Evan Hall and Deion Jackson? Let's say one emerges from the Colts. Where do you think they go? Do they go like even 7th, 8th round? Is that possible?
I think that's crazy. I don't think they get it that high.
Okay.
But I could see him going like the 10th, 11th, 12th type of range.
Okay.
I mean, there's still so many questions there with the rookie quarterback. I mean, Taylor was supposed to be the one that simplified everything. So I could see them adding one of the dust balls, the Kareem Hunts of the world, the Zekes of the world, if they make it that far, if Taylor, finds a way out of town, if Dalvin Cook still hasn't signed yet, it makes sense there. Fournette possibly. But yeah, I don't think they ever get up that high. I mean, what do you know about Evan Hall? What is he? I mean, yeah, he's a pretty good college player, but like he's a rookie with no real draft capital, in my opinion. And Deion Jackson, who's a good backup running back, but like to move them up in the range where you're talking about like Madison and Cook and Dobbins and Javonte Williams, DeAndre Swift and Gibson, and nah, it's not for me.
Sir, Israel Abanikanda goes in the 18th round. Do you think that he looked good in the first preseason game? This is kind of a question I can relate it back to. Obviously, he was a fifth-round pick. A lot of people project him to go higher than the NFL draft. Basically, this question is with his performance, and then obviously it didn't happen. Obviously, Dalvin comes out and says, I will probably be signing with the Jets. Right now, August 6th, is Dalvin Cook going to be a New York Jet, or is he going to wind up somewhere else?
I mean, I didn't think he was leaving town without being a Jet, so it's definitely
weird situation.
Kind of hope. A part of me kind of hoped he went there, just because I don't have a ton of Brees Hall. I have him. I've been adding him more because he's been cheap, and people have been a little scared off by it. But I don't know. I just don't want him to go to Miami. I don't care where Dalvin Cook goes; just not Miami. If he goes to the Patriots, yeah, it's annoying, but like Stevenson, I still think will take that job pretty clearly. But where is a fit that Dalvin Cook's not going to screw everything up? Like, could you imagine if he went to like the Chargers? What does that do to Eckler? You can keep going on the list. Like, what if he went to Dallas with Tony Pollard? Like, Tony Pollard would probably move into the third round. And I would love that because I would still take him, but it would be annoying. Like, where is a fit that Dalvin Cook like makes any sense right now in fantasy football? I mean, I watched that preseason game a little bit. I saw highlights with, the rookie, and you could tell yourself a story. Like, we talk about telling yourself stories in all these drafts. In the 18th round, you could be like, well, okay, Brees Hall, they don't add. Dalvin Cook doesn't come there. Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, Brees Hall's not ready early in the season. The rookie gets a couple carries, makes an impact. I could see him, if Hall comes back and he's not 100%, it's a story you can tell yourself. I liked him coming out of college. He landed in what, in my opinion, was one of the worst spots he could have landed on with Brees Hall.
Are we surprised that who would have thought August 6th that we'd be hearing way more positive news about recovery and all that for Javonte Williams than Brees Hall? Would not have expected that one.
I still have my doubts, and I will continue to have my doubts, and I'm going to trust, my process when it comes to drafting and my process when it comes to, guys coming off injuries. But the Javonte thing is crazy to me because I expect them to be on the PUP list for a while, and to be practicing and making an impact at practice and potentially playing early in the preseason is wild to me.
Terp, it's always in these later rounds. It's always because they're lottery tickets, right? That's what you look for. You can't really knock into these picks, especially knowing they can drop them. But I want to ask you quickly, and I want you to scan through it. Of the last couple of rounds, maybe a guy we haven't talked about or that you haven't discussed enough. What's kind of been your favorite pick from the last couple of rounds? Because I know you have some. I know you probably focus. You love Jalen Hyatt's situation. You've mentioned you've been high on Luke Musgrave, which we just talked about. But is there any others that you're like, I am a fan of that pick late in this round and the value that one of these teams is getting?
There's two, and they're both in the 19th round. Terrace Marshall and Michael Wilson. I mean, two young receivers. We talk about Marshall. A couple years ago, he was the hot player in the preseason. We talk about the preseason puff pieces. Mm-hmm. I mean, my man was getting moved up into the single-digit rounds, and I was one that fell for that trap.
You were a victim.
I was a victim, and it was a total disaster when it came to him that season. He kind of fell off the map. You see a couple, pieces this week, a couple of videos of him making some nice catches, having a relationship with Bryce Young. He still has talent. We're talking about that, factories in college. LSU has some star receivers too. Mm-hmm. Jefferson, Chase, Odell. We can keep going on the list there. I mean, there's a ton of them. And is he in that range? No, he's not. He's nowhere close to that range. But in Carolina, you have Mingo, Thielen, Chark, and Marshall. Are any that much different than the other person? No. So if he gets playing time, coaching staff believes in him, he has potential. And then we talk about Michael Wilson. The Cardinals are bad. Let's just call it what it is. They're going to be the worst team in football this year. And honestly, I don't think it's close. But somebody has to play on the team. And with Marquise Brown, he's a little banged up early. Still, obviously like him and Trey McBride. But outside of that, why can't Michael Wilson be the next guy? I mean, we're talking about some Rondell Moore can't stay healthy. Greg Dortch, average NFL receiver. James Conner, great story, outstanding player. But by the time that they're 1-11, James Conner is probably not going to be getting that many touches.
Yeah.
So Michael Wilson's been getting a lot of positive, press in thing. And in the 19th round, it's worth a lottery ticket. It's worth a shot. I would much rather take him over a guy like Michael Carter, over a guy like Kenny McIntosh, who we talked about earlier. Kyron Williams is another guy that I looked at. Is not a bad pick. It seems like he's the backup to Cam Akers as of right now. Mm-hmm. So that makes a ton of sense there. We talked about Evan Hull and Deion Jackson. I like Keontae Ingram. I think he'll be the starting running back in money rounds. Whether that's a fantasy factor, that's totally different. I still think Malik Davis is the best running back, not named Tony Pollard in Dallas. They could be annoying and add one of these veterans, but there's a lot of good picks in these later rounds. And like you said, they're all lottery tickets. Most of them. I mean, you're not expecting week 1, week 2, week 3 production, but these guys have potential if something goes wrong ahead of them. The Dwayne McBrides of the world, Joshua Kellys of the world, even Cordarrelle Patterson. I mean, you've seen him the last couple seasons start the season off pretty solid and then obviously tail off.
It's always tough seeing all the preseason camp clips and all these teams and you're excited about it, and then you just see Colt McCoy and the Cardinals are like, oh, and Jonathan Gannon's the coach. It's just,
I mean, he looks like he's way in over his head early on.
They're in a good spot though, because of the draft capital they have now. And they're
tons of draft capital, but
the real question is, they get first overall with Kyler's contract. They would trade it for a bounty of picks that we haven't seen in so long for Caleb Williams. But really, they should just take Caleb Williams. But I don't know how that works.
They 1,000% should take Caleb Williams and trade Kyler Murray to anybody who wants him. If they can get a bag of peanuts for Kyler Murray, get rid of him.
I mean,
that guy's never winning you anything.
Carson wants to get traded in his contract. Probably, although he
had some think about it. We talk about it every year. Some of these teams that are just desperate at quarterback. Yeah, is Arizona going to get the world for Kyler Murray? No, but with that contract's going to be the crutch. But somebody's going to come to the table with a first-round pick, maybe more, and they'll be able to get rid of Kyler Murray and take Caleb Williams and start over.
They would have no leverage, obviously. Teams saying, well, you want Caleb Williams. There's some interesting spots, though, for Kyler if we're talking about him moving on. Like, let's say the Rams, Stafford really is down. They can get out of that contract. There's some – well, I'm talking about fit-wise. Kyler and McVay could be fun, right? I mean, you saw at times Cliff obviously had issues beyond that, but interesting to think about. Just it triggered by that thought process when you said they're going to be the worst team in the league, which I'm sure a lot of people think. Terp, that's going to do it for us. The first FFPC main event coverage in the books. Every Sunday night we'll be doing one of these. We'll be covering them. I believe every single one we're aiming to have at 7 p.m. So a nice prime time slot. Interesting draft room. We're excited to see how the ADP adapts. I mean, preseason games are going to be here before we know it. So that's only going to impact ADP more, especially when that one game that each team usually plays where they play the starters for at least a quarter. So very excited for that. Our next live stream is, we don't exactly know who's on. It's going to be two of myself, you, or Bulky. Tuesday, Fantasy Pros coverage. I mentioned August 15th at 10 p.m. Superflex best ball coverage, August 23rd at 8 p.m. We have a live Dynasty startup. The FFPC main event, slow drafts are drafting, online live drafts are drafting. $1 million is on the line. That's the grand prize, $5.9 million prize pool. The best in the business playing the FFPC main event. Terp, thank you for joining me as always. We'll be back here live Tuesday night for Fantasy Pros Championship coverage. And then after that, next Sunday, we'll be back with another FFPC main event. See you guys then.